The Yellow Sea had been deceptively calm that night. Waves rolled gently against the steel hull of the USS Barry, an American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer patrolling in international waters. Radar scopes glowed a soft green. Sonar operators hummed through routine reports, and the bridge maintained its usual disciplined quiet. For years, such patrols had been a staple of U.S. presence in Northeast Asia, a reminder to allies that Washington's shadow stretched across the Pacific, and a warning to adversaries that the sea lanes were never theirs to control. But calm seas have a way of masking tempests beneath. At 2:43 local time, the Serenity was ripped apart. From the coastal shadows of North Korea's western seaboard, a vessel the size of a fishing trawler suddenly belched fire. The launch plume of a Nongo-class fast attack craft, barely visible to naked eye, arced sharply into the sky. Within seconds, its payload, a C-802 derivative cruise missile, cut across the horizon at supersonic speed, skimming the wavetops with murderous precision. Missile inbound, bearing 037, range 25 kilometers, the Aegis operator's voice cracked through the comms. Klaxons screamed. Red lights strobed across compartments. The crew of the Barry leapt into battle stations, their training kicking in with cold efficiency. The destroyer's vertical launch cells coughed awake, spitting two SM-2 interceptors toward the incoming threat. Electronic countermeasures blanketed the air with deceptive noise. Yet the missile's guidance was stubborn, cleverly modified with upgraded seekers, clearly beyond North Korea's known capabilities. Impact was inevitable. The warhead slammed into the Barry's starboard aft section, ripping through steel plating in a flash of fire and concussion. The deck shuddered. Alarms howled. Sailors were thrown to the ground. Thick smoke poured from a gutted section of the destroyer. She did not sink, but the message was unmistakable. North Korea, under cover of night, had drawn first blood, and behind that single missile, there was more than just Pyongyang's defiance. By dawn, images of the wounded destroyer circulated globally. Satellite shots confirmed the signature of the attacking craft, a Nongo-class fast missile boat, a design originating in Iran and suspiciously modified with Chinese radar systems. The Pentagon's initial assessment was grim. This was not an isolated provocation, but the visible tip of a deeper design. North Korea had tested America's tolerance. China had supplied the tools. Iran's fingerprints lingered on the technology. What looked like a rogue strike from Pyongyang was, in reality, the convergence of a shadowy triad: Tehran, Beijing, and Pyongyang seeking to probe Washington's red lines. Inside the White House Situation Room, Urgency Reynad, military brass, intelligence chiefs, and the National Security Council convened under the harsh glow of monitors. The Barry survived. Casualties are limited. But this is an act of war, Admiral Harries declared, his tone cold. North Korea doesn't fire on a U.S. the destroyer without someone in Beijing greenlighting the move. CIA analysts laid out the deeper picture. Signals intelligence intercepted from Pyongyang hinted at joint wargaming with Chinese advisors in Nampo Naval Base. Satellite imagery showed unusual shipments arriving under cover of darkness, containers offloaded from Chinese freighters, hustled into fortified bunkers, and technical data on the missile impact revealed Chinese upgrades that allowed it to evade U.S. countermeasures. It was not simply North Korean bravado. It was Beijing's attempt to test Washington's resolve by proxy, to push the United States away from the Yellow Sea and fracture alliances in Asia. If America failed to respond decisively, the message to Tokyo and Seoul would be chilling. U.S. guarantees were words without steel. President Andrews faced a forked path. Retaliation risked escalation on the Korean peninsula, perhaps even dragging China closer to open confrontation. But restraint would hand Beijing a strategic victory without cost. The room knew there was no middle ground. Andrews broke the silence. If we let this stand, they'll own the Yellow Sea by next month. Hit them where it hurts, but hit them smart. The crosshairs locked on Nampo. 2 nights later, the Pacific Command's retaliation unfolded with clinical precision. The order carried the codename Operation Iron Dagger. Its purpose was clear: decapitate North Korea's naval strike capability and send an unmistakable warning to Beijing. At 3:15, B-2 Spirit Street Elf bombers slipped undetected across the Korean peninsula, invisible to North Korea's outdated radar network. Simultaneously, Tomahawk missiles erupted from U.S. submarines lurking beneath the waves. In less than 6 minutes, Nampo Naval Base, Pyongyang's western maritime hub, was lit in a hellish inferno. Fuel depots detonated in chain reactions, turning night into a false dawn. Warships docked at harbor buckled under precision-guided J-dams, their hulls twisted and torn. Command bunkers, once thought invulnerable, crumbled under GBU-57 bunker busters. The base's air defense's outdated KN-06 systems, mimicking Russian S-300 never had a chance. By the time North Korea scrambled aircraft from inland bases, the bombers were already ghosts beyond radar horizon. What stunned observers most was the precision. Civilian areas remained untouched. Only military targets, ships, foil, command nodes were obliterated. It was not a reckless show of force. It was a surgical strike. A message carved in fire. The United States does not absorb punches. It strikes back harder, cleaner, and without hesitation. When satellite imagery of the devastation hit international media, the world gasped. Nampo was gone, a naval hub reduced to twisted wreckage overnight, and in the ashes, America's resolve was undeniable. At this moment, the question isn't just about firepower, it's about allegiance. If you were watching this unfold, where would you stand? Comment 1 if you side with America's decisive strike, or sex if you support North Korea's gamble. But the strike carried more than explosions. As dawn broke, Washington revealed intelligence that turned the narrative upside down. Drone footage and satellite scans of the smoldering base showed Chinese-manufactured missile crates stacked in storage depots, half-charred but unmistakably marked with PLA shipping codes. Containers that once held radar modules, engines, and seeker heads. Proof, in high definition, of Beijing's silent hand. At the United Nations, Beijing scrambled to deny involvement, heralding lines of fabricated evidence, yet the images were irrefutable. Western analysts confirmed the coding matched shipments traced from Dalian ports weeks prior. What was meant to be hidden within North Korea's shadow had now been exposed in flames for Pyongyang. The humiliation was catastrophic. Their fleet gutted, their sponsor exposed, and their supposed invincibility punctured in a single night. For Beijing, the blow was strategic. What had been intended as a quiet test of American limits had become a global embarrassment, a reminder that Washington could not only see their moves, but also weaponize them in public view. Andrew's gamble had paid off. America's allies in Tokyo and Seoul cheered the decisive response, while Beijing and Pyongyang were left scrambling to contain the diplomatic fallout. Yet, behind the fiery spectacle lay the real twist. Weeks later, investigative leaks revealed what many in Washington already suspected. The Nongo strike had not been a surprise. The United States had known long before the missile launch that Pyongyang was preparing an attack. Signals intelligence, cyber infiltration, and satellite monitoring had painted the picture clearly. And rather than stopping it, Washington let it happen. The Berry had sailed deliberately close to the anticipated threat zone, equipped with reinforced countermeasures and prepped rescue contingents. The damage, though real, had been carefully contained. The purpose was bait, to draw out Pyongyang, and, more importantly, to force Beijing's hidden hand into the open. The operation at Nampo, then, was not simply retaliation, it was the springing of a trap. A meticulously laid snare designed to expose the China-North Korea nexus and dismantle it under the harsh light of global scrutiny. The spark in the Yellow Sea had not been an accident of escalation. It had been an orchestration, a calculated gambit in which Washington played the victim, only to rise as the avenger, and in doing so, unmask the puppet master behind the curtain. The war of shadows was over. The game of revelation had begun. The ashes of Nampo had barely settled when Washington moved to strike again. The message was simple. If America is challenged, the response will not stop with one blow. It will escalate until the enemy breaks. At 2 o'clock hours, 2B-2 spirits slipped out of the Pacific night, invisible against the stars. Their destination, Wonsan Naval Base. The pride of North Korea's Eastern Fleet, the mission was precise, merciless, and public by design. High above the East Sea, the bomb bays opened. Bunker busters spiraled down first, tearing through hardened shelters where submarines and missile boats hid. Then came the J-dams, slamming into fuel reservoirs and ammunition stockpiles. Firestorms rolled across the coastline, painting the horizon red. But the strike was only half the plan. At the same hour, the Pentagon released classified intercepts to the world. Audio files exposed direct orders from Pyongyang, authorizing the Nongo missile boat's attack, and woven inside, the commands were coded exchanges with Chinese technical advisors. The mask was ripped away. North Korea had not acted alone. By dawn, satellite imagery showed Wonsan in ruins, smoke columns rising where command centers once stood. North Korea had lost its eastern naval hub. Yet the real casualty was Beijing's deniability. Overnight, Washington had transformed a single skirmish into a global indictment. Allies rallied closer. Markets shook. Zhongnanhai reeled in panic. China had planned to test America quietly, shielded behind Pyongyang. But now, every headline blazed the same words. China's secret war exposed. Washington didn't hide its hand. Unlike Beijing's shadow games, America struck openly, broadcasting strength as deterrence. The world saw a pattern. America dictates the tempo. China reacts. Cornered. Sweating under global scrutiny. Then, deep inside NSA headquarters, analysts cracked a disturbing discovery. Embedded in North Korea's recovered systems were schematics of next-generation Chinese anti-ship missiles designs not yet fielded by China's own navy. The Nongo ambush was not reckless improvisation. It was a rehearsal with weapons of tomorrow. Seated by Beijing, the battlefield was no longer about Nampo or Wonsan. It was about a shadow arsenal, spreading quietly under China's proxy strategy, waiting for the right moment to erupt. The truth was clear. Wonsan was only the beginning. The ruins of Wonsan were still smoldering when the world began asking a dangerous question. If China had armed North Korea with weapons not yet even in Beijing's own arsenal, what else was being hidden in the shadows? American intelligence agencies fanned out, signals intercepts, satellite feeds, and cyber forensics painted an unsettling map. Networks of covert facilities stretching from the Korean Peninsula to Southeast Asia, all quietly nurtured under Beijing's patronage. The pattern was clear. China never intended to meet Washington head-on. Every strike, every escalation, was designed to flow through proxies. North Korea in the north, Cambodia in the south, others waiting in silence, like puppets on strings. They absorbed the risks while Beijing whispered from behind the curtain. Washington saw through it. Unlike its rivals, America thrived in transparency. So the response was deliberate. Bring the proxy game into the light and expose China as a power too afraid to fight directly. In a dramatic press conference, the Pentagon unveiled declassified satellite images of joint research sites on North Korean soil. The photos revealed hardened bunkers housing prototype missile canisters with unmistakable Chinese serial numbers. More shocking, fragments from the destroyed Nongo boat were displayed, circuit boards stamped with Chinese defense contractors' insignia. The world gasped. Beijing could no longer pretend. Markets trembled again. Southeast Asian governments, once cautious, now edged closer to Washington's orbit. The logic was undeniable. If China hid behind proxies, then no neighbor was safe from becoming the next pawn. Meanwhile, Beijing's silence was deafening. Every diplomatic channel issued denials. But the strain showed. Leaks from inside China's military circles revealed deep divisions, some commanders warning that the proxy strategy had backfired, others insisting it was too late to retreat. But then came the revelation that shifted the chessboard. A separate set of intercepted communications hinted that the North Korean rehearsal was never meant to succeed. It was bait. The plan, crafted in Beijing, was to trigger a U.S. retaliation so harsh that Pyongyang could claim victimhood and rally domestic unity, while China quietly tested how far Washington would go. Yet America didn't just retaliate, it flipped the script, exposing the scheme itself. The game was no longer proxy warfare in the shadows, it was open theater, and Beijing was trapped under the spotlight. Caught between retreat and humiliation, the stage was set for escalation. The ruins of Wonsan were still smoldering when the world began asking a dangerous question. If China had armed North Korea with weapons, not yet even in Beijing's own arsenal, what else was being hidden in the shadows? American intelligence agencies fanned out. Signals intercepts, satellite feeds, and cyber forensics painted an unsettling map. Networks of covert facilities stretching from the Korean peninsula to Southeast Asia, all quietly nurtured under Beijing's patronage. The pattern was clear. China never intended to meet Washington head-on. Every strike, every escalation, was designed to flow through proxies. North Korea in the north, Cambodia in the south, others waiting in silence, like puppets on strings. They absorbed the risks while Beijing whispered from behind the curtain. Washington saw through it. Unlike its rivals, America thrived in transparency. So the response was deliberate. Bring the proxy game into the light and expose China as a power too afraid to fight directly. In a dramatic press conference, the Pentagon unveiled declassified satellite images of joint research sites on North Korean soil. The photos revealed hardened bunkers housing prototype missile canisters with unmistakable Chinese serial numbers. More shocking, fragments from the destroyed Nongo boat were displayed circuit boards, stamped with Chinese defense contractors' insignia. The world gasped. Beijing could no longer pretend. Markets trembled again. Southeast Asian governments, once cautious, now edged closer to Washington's orbit. The logic was undeniable. If China hid behind proxies, then no neighbor was safe from becoming the next pawn. Meanwhile, Beijing's silence was deafening. Every diplomatic channel issued denials. But the strain showed. Leaks from inside China's military circles revealed deep divisions, some commanders warning that the proxy strategy had backfired, others insisting it was too late to retreat. But then came the revelation that shifted the chessboard. A separate set of intercepted communications hinted that the North Korean rehearsal was never meant to succeed. It was bait. The plan, crafted in Beijing, was to trigger a U.S. retaliation so harsh that Pyongyang could claim victimhood and rally domestic unity, while China quietly tested how far Washington would go. Yet America didn't just retaliate, it flipped the script, exposing the scheme itself. The game was no longer proxy warfare in the shadows. It was open theater, and Beijing was trapped under the spotlight. Caught between retreat and humiliation, the stage was set for escalation. As Beijing reeled from the exposure of its proxy game in Korea, attention shifted southward to the Cambodian coastline, where Ream Naval Base sat like a quiet fuse waiting to be lit. For months, whispers had circled in intelligence briefings. The People's Liberation Army Navy had gained a shadow foothold in Ream. Tucked away under Cambodian flags, the base, upgraded with suspiciously advanced radar arrays and reinforced bunkers, was less a Cambodian stronghold than a Chinese outpost masquerading in local colors. The problem? Its air defenses were patchwork at best. Analysts noted gaps in radar coverage, antiquated missile battery, and vulnerable supply depots. In any confrontation, Ream would be the first to burn. Washington and Bangkok both knew it. The Thai Air Force had already drilled precision runs with JAS-39 Gripens, while American planners quietly mapped scenarios involving B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. HIMARS strikes launched from concealed jungle pads, and JDAMs raining down from the stratosphere. If Cambodia stepped too far into China's shadow, Ream would become not a shield, but a liability. The warning shot came suddenly. A flotilla of Cambodian patrol boats operating suspiciously close to Thai waters. Locked Hadar Ontua Thai, Hekonaisan Si Plane. Though no missile was fired, the act itself was enough to ignite alarms. The Pentagon seized the moment. In a public statement, a U.S. admiral declared, if Ream becomes a staging ground for coercion, it will be treated as hostile territory. Any attack launched from that base will invite consequences beyond Cambodia's imagination. The message was unmistakable. It was not just Cambodia being warned, it was China, told in plain daylight that America would not hesitate. Markets staggered again, and whispers of a Ream scenario became the new obsession in military circles. Analysts sketched timelines, from a Cambodian provocation to a Thai retaliatory strike, followed by American escalation. Each simulation ended with the same picture: Ream in flames. But then came the revelation that deepened the crisis. A cache of leaked Cambodian documents suggested that the PLA had already smuggled long-range missile components into Ream, hidden in sealed containers marked as construction equipment. This meant that Ream was not just a listening post, it was a potential launchpad. Suddenly, the calculus shifted. What had seemed a vulnerable outpost now loomed as a loaded gun pointed at Southeast Asia. The stage for confrontation was no longer theoretical. It was prime. While Ream burned and Cambodia stumbled, Beijing's gaze shifted east. Taiwan had always been the crown jewel in China's ambitions. But now, with America standing openly in Southeast Asia, the temptation was clear. Create a second front, split Washington's attention, and stretch its power thin. Chinese war planners called it the Gambit. The idea was simple but ruthless. If the U.S. was busy in Cambodia and Thailand, its ability to defend Taiwan would weaken. So Beijing staged aggressive naval exercises near the Taiwan Strait, splashing propaganda across state television jets screaming overhead. Missiles rolling through parades, admirals boasting of liberation readiness, but the theater concealed desperation. Intelligence intercepts showed nervousness inside the PLA. They feared what America had already proven. Washington anticipated every move. If Beijing pushed too far, it might expose not only Taiwan, but also its fragile hold on allies like Cambodia. The U.S. response was blisteringly fast. Before Chinese propaganda could fully take root, America executed a double deployment. From Guam, a squadron of F-22 Raptor Street reeked toward Taiwan. From Diego Garcia, long-range bombers repositioned closer to the Pacific Theater. Then came the masterstroke. The U.S. revealed that elements of the same B-2 Spirits seen in Thailand had already been rotated toward Taiwan's defense weeks before China even announced its gambit. Washington hadn't been distracted at all. It had read Beijing's script in advance. China's gamble crumbled. Instead of dividing America, it had allowed Washington to showcase its global reach, reassuring Taiwan while cornering Beijing diplomatically. Yet the real twist arrived not from jets or warships, but from the shadows. Leaked documents, origin unknown, surfaced in major Asian news outlets. They exposed secret meetings between Chinese operatives and Cambodian officials, detailing plans to use Ream not just as a naval outpost, but as a base to funnel weapons toward a potential Taiwan blockade. Suddenly, the gambit was no longer just about Taiwan. It was proof of a coordinated Chinese plot, stretching from Cambodia to the Strait. Beijing was humiliated on two fronts at once. Its proxy in Cambodia was bleeding, its ambitions in Taiwan exposed, and America stood tall as the orchestrator who had predicted it all. By now, Beijing's strategy of using proxies was in shambles. Cambodia's ream was bleeding credibility. North Korea's reckless missile corvette had triggered U.S. fury, and the Taiwan gambit had collapsed. Yet China still clung to one fragile hope: its network of smaller allies. The proxy chain meant to harass and distract America. This chain stretched across the region: rogue generals in Myanmar, shadowy militias in Cambodia, and North Korea's unpredictable navy. Each was meant to act as a thorn, never strong enough to challenge the U.S. directly, but always disruptive. But Washington had learned the rhythm. If proxies were the tools, the only way to dismantle Beijing's plan was to break the chain itself. The U.S. strategy was surgical. Instead of confronting China head-on, it exposed the corruption and fragility of these proxies. Financial networks tied to Beijing's intelligence arms were hacked and dumped into the open. Videos of Cambodian officials secretly meeting Chinese operatives appeared online. Anonymous leaks revealed that North Korean naval operations had been bankrolled not by Pyongyang alone, but through shadow funding funneled from Chinese state enterprises. Each revelation hit harder than bombs. Allies of Beijing were being stripped bare, losing legitimacy in front of their own people. Then came the visible strike. While leaks rattled the information sphere, the U.S. military acted with precision. A joint exercise between Thailand and the U.S. suddenly shifted tone. Instead of drills, JAS-39 Gripens, supported by American F-35 Second, conducted live fire suppression strikes against a mock coastal base eerily resembling Ream. The message was unmistakable. Washington and Bangkok were prepared to neutralize any proxy outpost the moment conflict escalated. North Korea, too, felt the burn. A covert U.S. cyber operation disabled communication links to one of Pyongyang's forward naval bases. Ships sat dead in the water for 48 hours, humiliated and blind. The proxy chain was being cut link by link. But the sharpest twist came not from the U.S., but from within Beijing's own camp. Disillusioned Cambodian insiders, fearing collapse, leaked a trove of classified Chinese documents directly to Western intelligence. These papers revealed that Beijing had privately admitted its proxies were expendable pawns, never meant to be saved once exposed. The revelation detonated trust. Proxies across Asia, once willing to serve as Beijing's shield, now hesitated. Who would sacrifice themselves if China viewed them as disposable? In trying to use proxies to bleed America, Beijing had instead triggered paranoia within its own network. The chain wasn't just breaking, it was disintegrating from the inside. The board was set, and every piece had moved. What began as a reckless missile attack from a North Korean corvette had spiraled into Beijing's greatest humiliation in decades. America had not only retaliated with force but dismantled China's proxy web piece by piece. Now came the endgame, where Washington showed that it had been orchestrating the collapse all along. Beijing, desperate, tried one last bluff: naval maneuvers near the South China Sea, accompanied by fiery state media declarations, promised unbearable consequences if Washington continued. But the bravado rang hollow. Every attempt at escalation only revealed how cornered China had become. US intelligence was several steps ahead. It leaked satellite imagery of Chinese frigates shadowing Cambodian waters, embarrassing Beijing by showing the world it had violated its own denials. In parallel, Washington rallied its allies. Tokyo, Seoul, Canberra, and Bangkok all issued synchronized statements condemning China's proxy aggression. The regional isolation was suffocating. For the first time in years, Beijing stood alone in a storm of its own, making Then came the hammer blow. In the early hours of a moonless night, B-2 Spirit bombers launched from Guam. They flew undetected, cloaked in silence, until they reached the Korean peninsula in a matter of minutes. Precision JDAM strikes obliterated key naval infrastructure at Wonsan and Nampo, command centers, missile storage sites, and fuel depots erupted in fireballs. Satellite footage of the aftermath leaked almost instantly. What was once a heavily fortified North Korean bastion was reduced to smoldering ruins, and Washington did not deny it. In a rare moment of cold clarity, the U.S. publicly announced, "This is the cost of reckless escalation. The United States will strike at any proxy base that threatens peace and stability." It wasn't just punishment, it was doctrine. The twist came in the silence that followed, not from Beijing's words, but from its actions, or rather, its inaction. China, usually quick to thunder with propaganda, issued no threats, no military response, no naval pushback. Behind closed doors, Beijing's Politburo realized the unthinkable. Any direct clash with America would risk catastrophic defeat. The very proxies it had nurtured were now liabilities, stripped of credibility and sacrificed under fire. And as the dust settled, an even deeper revelation spread. The U.S. had known China's playbook from the start. Each strike, each leak, each countermeasure had not been reactive but premeditated. Beijing hadn't been outmaneuvering Washington. Washington had been walking Beijing into a trap of its own, making the Great Proxy War had ended not with China bleeding America, but with America dismantling China's network piece by piece, until nothing remained. The board was clear. The game was over.